Welcome to the last transmission. This week, Holly is out of the country, so I've got my dad here.
Hello.
You gonna say what we're gonna do this?
Yeah, well, we weren't quite sure what to do. We can't do another Babylon 5 episode with Holly off. It's more fun having somebody who has no idea what Babylon 5 is about rather than somebody who's watched every episode multiple times. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so you're going to save up, I think it's Midnight on the Firing Line.
Yeah, that's the next one.
Yeah, is the next one. So you two have got to watch that. But what I thought might be interesting is just going through some of the science fiction that I've liked over my lifetime. I was born in 1980. And yeah, I've watched a lot of science fiction program, and it's changed quite a lot over my lifetime. Thought I'd just share that with you, with the audience.
Yeah.
Especially if a lot of the audience are around about your age, late teens, early 20s.
I think it's good that I'm on because Holly knows a lot more about sci-fi than me. If other people like me and they haven't really watched it, I can just ask the questions and stuff about it.
The way science fiction programs work has changed a huge amount. For people your age, it's quite normal to have 13 episode series with a beginning, storyline, and conclusion, and then possibly a following series.
Yeah.
They do that a lot with the Star Wars TV shows. Some of them, like The Mandalorian, I think are really, really good, really interesting. Some they're all right. I didn't mind Ahsoka. It was all right. It sort of went off, but then I can't even remember the name of their last one. I kind of got bored halfway through.
Yeah.
Um,
It's very saturated.
yeah, and it's just that the writing doesn't seem to be very, very good at the moment, which is a shame because there are some good ideas. But that is the way science fiction works nowadays. You, like I said, you have a start of the series, and you have a story that goes all the way through, and it finishes. You know, then the storyline finishes.
There's a definite storyline throughout
Yeah,
the whole
but
thing.
when I was growing up, that was completely different. See, I was, like I said, I was born in 1980, so I got some of the 60s science fiction. So the ones I remember, they used to transmit over here in the UK on a Sunday. And the two I remember the most was Lost in Space and Land of the Giants, which were quite. And Lost in Space is probably the more famous of that. I'm not sure if I've shown you any of them.
No, I've not heard of them, but I think that's interesting. You said that they what was the word, broadcasted,
Yeah.
because that's actually something I didn't really think of. We can just
Yeah.
stream it any time, and I think that's kind of in some ways that's a good thing. In some ways, that's a bad thing because we
Yeah.
have such. I think for a lot of people my age, attention span is an
Yeah.
issue, and it's an issue for me because I think it's just overwhelming the options. I don't know where to go to watch. I don't know what to watch. Whereas for you, you just picked a channel.
Well, we had to watch what was on.
Yeah.
And the way it worked was they would make a TV program, and they call it was called syndication. Where and you'll see this because you watched some of the original series Star Trek.
Yeah, yeah.
You've seen some of the Next Generation
Yeah.
Star Trek, and it goes along the format of you start the episode, something happens, a lot of stuff, adventure happens, whether it's with the characters or there's a battle or something, and then at the end everything's fine and the crew kind of reset to how it was at the beginning of the show, and then for the next episode it's rinse and repeat. And the reason for that is because it was affected, I think, by the way American, because they had a lot more networks over here. When I was growing up, we had four channels.
Wow.
BBC One, Two, 1 and 2 were BBC channels. Number 3 was ITV. They had adverts. So BBC, the channels, they didn't have adverts in the middle of the programmes.
Okay.
Because of it was
TV
paid through the licensing.
Yeah.
ITV had to have advertising. I don't remember it coming out, but Channel 4, I don't remember what year it came out, but it was in the 80s. So that was a fairly new channel. And that was it. I do remember Channel 5 coming out, but that wasn't until the late 90s, I think it was. So for my growing up, it was 4 channels.
Wow.
But in America, it was a similar thing. You had network channels. And so what they would do, the studios would make a TV program for America. A series was about 22 to 26 episodes.
Okay.
And they'd all be in a similar vein. You'd have the story each week, and they'd sell the rights to broadcast them to the different channels,
Mhm.
and then they just air them in whatever order they wanted.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. And because if it's being broadcast, if there was a definite storyline, you would have to make sure you are free when
Yeah,
it's broadcast. So if you were to miss an episode for whatever reason, then you can't really continue watching it because you've just missed a
no,
chunk.
no, and that was the idea. It was just a case of right, we're selling us. So Lost in Space, Land of the Giants. You knew what the story was. Lost in Space. It was a fun one. It started off as black and white, and
Yeah.
eventually became colour. But basically, it was a family, the Robinson family. Um,
Oh, I think I've heard of
they did do a movie
that. Okay.
with Matt LeBlanc in the early 2000s, which wasn't very popular, but
Okay.
it's one of them ones I quite like. If there's nothing else to do,
Oh, okay.
nothing else on, and I'm stuck in, and it's
Just
on, I'll watch it because
yeah.
it's fun.
Yeah.
It's good fun. They have done another series which is more serialized, but the original one, there was the mum and dad, their three children, two daughters and a son, Will Robinson.
I feel like I
They had the
recognize.
robot. The robot.
Yeah, I feel like I recognize the.
Yeah, they had a pilot as well, who I think fell in love with the oldest daughter,
Okay.
and then they had the famous Doctor Smith,
Okay.
and he was paid to sabotage the starship when it launched,
Okay.
and rather than going to where they were supposed to go, it crash landed, and they spent
Oh.
the next several years trying to find their way home,
Mm.
and they'd crash on a different planet, then they'd have several adventures, and they'd take off and fly to a different planet, and it was like that.
Yeah, I feel like I'd recognize it.
Probably would. Will Robinson, he plays a character in Babylon 5. You're
Okay.
not met him
Okay.
yet, but I
No.
will point it out
Okay.
when you meet
Yeah,
him. But
that's
yeah,
fine.
Bill Mooney.
Okay.
He plays a famous character in Babylon 5. But
Okay.
he was the original Will Robinson.
I think the idea of it resetting every episode is quite good, but also that sounds very like, like the Simpsons kind of thing. You can
Yeah,
kind of, I don't know if the Simpsons have a specific storyline, but it's kind of reset, like they're all the same
it's all the same.
age,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
nothing really
It
changes.
was similar, but that was how TV was done back then, because you'd have to sell it,
Yeah,
and then they'd constantly be swapping what times it's
yeah.
broadcast, and you didn't have at the time. So in the 60s, you didn't have home recordings.
Okay.
You'd have the show would be made, it then be
Mm.
broadcast, and then I think it was with Star Trek, the original series, they started to do reruns. Reruns was a new thing, but
Okay.
originally, because there was a big argument with Doctor Who, the original William Hartnell ones,
Right.
when
Yeah.
they first wanted, because originally it was TV was done the same way that a play would be done.
Okay.
You'd get all the actors together,
Yeah.
you'd put the play on, and then when the play was over, that was it.
Okay.
Because there was a big discussion on how actors should be paid,
Okay.
and then when they started to broadcast it, there was a big discussion.
Yeah.
But that's why a lot of the BBC series from the 60s and early 70s were lost,
Yeah.
because they never expected to rerun it.
Redo it. Yeah.
And
I
they didn't
mean,
have home videos either or anything like
no.
that, so it was just a case of, right, well, this is filmed and broadcast.
Yeah.
That's it, we're done with it.
And that is something I am familiar with. Doctor Who, classic Doctor Who. Holly's more familiar. He's quite good crossing over with each other, showing each other different things. But she's more familiar with new Doctor Who, modern Doctor Who, and I'm really familiar with classic Doctor Who.
Yeah, sorry
That's
about that.
that's just something I just really. That's kind of the only thing TV wise I will just watch it and
Yeah,
I can
that's my fault for
I
collecting the
think yeah,
DVDs.
because I you didn't have room for the DVD, so I had them in my room.
Yeah,
I had like a bookcase thing, and then I just watched them because I didn't have. I had a TV with a DVD player, but I didn't have any kind of streaming stuff.
no, when you were, we didn't,
So
yeah, we didn't really get. I think we got
streaming was
well streaming.
later.
I think we got it late 2000s, early
Yeah,
2010s.
I think.
But it all depended on, because it wasn't until broadband came out when
Yeah,
you were little, that
yeah.
you could actually start to stream.
I
But
mean, for me, I was quite content with just the Doctor Who DVDs
yeah,
because you had so many, and
yeah,
you have obviously Doctor Who is quite unique where obviously you have different kind of areas like doctors, so
Yeah.
that if you don't like one,
Well,
you can go
I
to
think that was the
the
genius.
longevity of it.
They don't
Yeah.
think they planned it that way, but it
No.
was kind of the genius of Doctor Who, where as it starts to get stale, rather than just not only replacing the writers being able to move on and the directors and producers being able to move on and getting fresh people in, you then got a fresh actor in
Yeah.
with a completely different take.
Yeah.
Because it also, growing up, it also affects your childhood. Because my mum, your nana,
Yeah.
her doctor was John Pertwee.
Yeah, I know the third one.
Whereas,
She's
yeah, she loves John Pertwee.
yeah.
That was her doctor.
Yeah.
Whereas for me and people my age, it was Peter Davidson.
Okay.
He was the one I remember being
Yeah.
broadcast. No, and granddad, my mum and dad stopped. My dad stopped watching it for the Sixth Doctor, Colin Baker. He
Okay.
kind of got bored and didn't
Okay.
really watch it.
Okay.
But he did used to watch Peter Davidson. So
Yeah.
that's what I remember. That's the one I
Yeah.
remember.
I know, I just they all have their unique characteristics, but
Yeah.
they're all the Doctor. They all have similarities, and then there's
Yeah.
the nostalgia where sometimes they bring back little things, or you have special episodes where there's multiple Doctors with
Yeah.
like the three
Well,
Doctors,
that was
the
the
five
first
Doctors.
DVD I got was the Five Doctors
Yeah,
because
yeah.
that had when I was little we had a video rental place round the corner from
Ah,
us.
yeah,
That had all gone by the time you were old enough to know about it. But it was,
yeah,
you'd either watch what was on TV, or you'd have to buy the videos,
yeah.
or you could go rent them. And
Because
at the local shop they had the Five Doctors to rent.
okay,
So
yeah.
I used to rent that.
Yeah. I remember when we used to rent Netflix when that was like a postal.
Well, that kind of stopped. That was an interest because I was working at Royal Mail at the time. It was quite interesting that when DVDs first came out, that idea sort of took off.
Yeah.
Love Film was
Yeah.
what we had.
Actually, I remember, yeah.
Yeah, and that was hugely popular.
Mm.
Really, really popular. You used
I,
to get thousands and
and
thousands of them coming through the post.
And I remember them coming through the post, but I remember specifically we had Nintendo Wii,
Yes.
and that's our most used console. I don't know how much you paid for it, but that out of all the consoles we've ever had, we still play the Wii
Yeah.
because it's just that. I see why it's the most sold console.
Yeah.
It's just we used to rent like Just Dance and different
Yeah.
games, and then at the library
We used to
used
go down
to
the library and
yeah,
get
we
them.
used to rent. They
Take
did
you down there.
DS games, they did DVDs, obviously books, but the DS games and the Wii games were
Yeah, well, that was the same with the videos, but yeah, that was I do remember that when Love Film was the big thing.
yeah,
I think unless you worked in Royal Mail at that point, you didn't realise how many
oh, big,
thousands of them
yeah.
used to every day we'd have thousands
Because
of
that's
these
quite
DVDs.
genius,
It
you know.
was, it was, but then once broadband came in, that's when you got Netflix,
Yeah,
and it started to change, and everything started to change. But going back to the '60s, once they started doing reruns, you then have because some of the old TV programs, I didn't actually realise how few episodes
okay,
they made of them because I just remember it constantly being on.
yeah,
And it was all rerun. That kind of thing was the way it did. So the earliest ones I remember, Lost in Space, Land of the
yeah,
Giants, where they just kept making series until they stopped. They never really resolved the story.
yeah,
Then they had in the '70s, they ended up making. I never saw it, but they did. I remember there was the Bionic Woman, the $64,000 Man, which
okay,
which which was science fiction. I don't recall really watching. There was two that I do remember. They were broadcast in here. Was Buck Rogers in the 25th Century
okay. I've heard of that.
and Battlestar Galactica, the
Okay,
original Battlestar Galactica, which I
okay,
believe I do have on DVD somewhere.
okay,
And they were, I mean, the Battlestar Galactica, that was hugely influenced by Star Wars,
okay,
the original Star Wars, because Star Wars: A New Hope came out, and then I forget I think it was Gary Larson or someone like that. I forget the name of the guy. Brought out Battlestar Galactica, and it was an
yeah.
interesting storyline. You had the Cylons. Do you remember the great big robots with the red eye, the
Visor
laser,
kind of.
the laser thing that went left to right?
Oh,
Yeah, that was
yeah, yeah,
Battlestar Galactica.
yeah. Okay,
And they only made one series of that, which it was only later on I
okay,
found that out. I was surprised because they just repeated it.
yeah,
I recall, but that was an interesting storyline, and the models were really good for that at that period, you didn't have computer graphics, so
Right.
they actually had to make the
The
physical
models.
models. Yeah,
Okay, so like Star Wars
yeah, and
and
so
Star
it's
Trek.
yeah. So you look at some of the models in Star Trek. Star Wars had some fantastic models, and they
Yeah.
kind of done it on that. Buck Rogers was another really good one. I remember when I was little.
Yeah.
The idea was a guy from the 20th century went off on a space mission and got frozen, and
Okay.
came back 500 years later. Well,
Okay.
it had I think the favourites one was the robots.
Okay.
You had this artificial intelligent doctor, which was
Okay.
basically a big circle, looked like
I
a
think you
biscuit
showed.
tin.
Yeah, you showed
Yeah,
me.
and he was carried around by this little robot, which is going to be.
That's something I miss. Though CGI is quite amazing. There's not. It's like Button Moon. I was talking to Holly, and that's physical puppets.
Yeah,
That's a physical set someone has built. Whereas animation is like amazing what they can do, but you kind of miss the artistic part of
yeah,
it
yeah.
in some ways.
Yeah, some of it was it was amazing. The skills of the model maker, the
Yeah.
practical effects, what the work some of them, and the ideas to make the effects
Mm.
were quite amazing
And I
what they
think
did.
that kind of reminds me of something like Wallace and Gromit. They
Yeah,
could just animate something like that,
yeah,
but it's just the fact that they go through these long processes and they have these things that challenges they have to overcome. And looking
yeah.
at the behind the scenes and the really clever things people come up with.
Yeah, I mean, they're really amazing. They really are amazing what they come up with. I mean, one of the ones I remember reading about was in Superman, the first movie with Christopher Reeves,
Okay.
the true Superman.
Okay.
Uh,
Fight with Holly about that.
yeah, although Henry Carver he's quite good, but for me, Christopher Reeve
Holly,
is the true
Holly's
Superman.
really into DC at the moment. She's really.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure we're talking about that. But when they did the original one of Krypton, when they were going flying into Krypton, and they
Yeah.
did Krypton Sun, I was watching the documentary on it, and the way they did it was they put a camera above a metal bin,
Okay.
filled it with flammable gas, and set
Okay.
fire to it and filmed it. And that
Okay.
effect, they
Right.
slowed down the film, and that was the sun. And
Yeah.
you look at it, wow, that's absolutely incredible what they did with that. But some of the physical stuff it is, but it's
Really.
expensive. So
That's another
I
thing.
can see why they've
Yeah.
moved on, and it is a shame.
Yeah. And you have to
And
pay people for their time, and a lot of the time it
yeah,
takes a lot
this
longer.
is the thing, and whether they've got the budgets now, or whether they're
Yeah.
willing to invest in that or not, I don't
Yeah.
know. But some of the it takes a certain kind of mind to come up with these
Yeah. Yeah.
amazing effects, and yeah, so you had a lot of the with Battlestar Galactica, and then you had the physical effects,
I
but
think.
again, it was that syndicated, and the original Star Trek with Captain Kirk. Again, it was syndicated. It was done for reruns.
Right. Yeah.
But during my lifetime, that has changed
Right.
over the decades. Now I think that started to change in the 90s,
Yeah.
and it's interesting sort of looking back. You still had, I mean, Star Trek became a huge, and I've always been a big Star Trek fan.
Right.
I used to watch it with your dad,
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
your granddad.
Yeah.
It was always Star Trek was BBC Two, 6 o'clock. Yeah, so you had to have specific
That's
times.
another thing that we miss. I think, that makes, you have a specific time, it's routine.
Mm.
And for a lot of people, it's so accessible that it kind of ruins it because then you get overwhelmed. And unless you specifically put into place, like, I don't know, Tuesdays are evenings are the day we watch something, unless you specifically have it set in your routine. It's just you can watch it whenever, and I think it's like a family thing. You watch it with other
Yeah,
your
well,
family.
your nan never liked it,
No,
but we
but
used to watch it before we were able to do, because by that time home video recorders had come out,
mm,
and I think this is why I know a lot of the next generation. I know them really really well because we used to record them.
right,
So I
okay,
know it was on BBC Two because I remember the
record,
intro.
yeah,
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 the intro. It's BBC Two
right,
now.
right,
It's time for Star Trek, and so we used to record them. But if
yeah,
we wanted to watch something, you'd either have what was being on at live TV,
or what you have recorded.
or what you have recorded. So there's
Mm.
certain films I know very very well because they're the only ones we had.
Though that's you have more options that way, but you can record what you want. It still limits you,
You're
and
still very
I
limited.
kind of I
Yeah,
like, and I think it's kind of a my age, my generation kind of thing. Like phones do everything. You know, it's not just a phone. It's like
Mm.
it has so many uses that a lot of people have gone back to what they call dumb phones.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, Finn, my brother, was talking about getting one for him because and then getting like a separate MP3 player or just physical media is a big thing now because
Yeah.
it slows down the process and it limits you more.
Yeah, it's. I find. I mean, that's quite a fascinating thing because I've still got my parents on vinyl. I've added to it
Yeah.
over the
So
decades, the vinyl. But there was a period in the eighties. If you want to buy an album, you bought it on vinyl.
yeah.
CDs started to come in, but the price hadn't come down. It was sort of
Okay.
in
Yeah.
the
So it's
nineties,
not
the price came down enough so that it,
accessible.
yeah, it then switched over. People switched from vinyl. But we had a period from the late 90s to certainly when I left home, when I got married to your mum and we left home. I remember my record player broke. I couldn't get one for love nor money.
Right.
You just
I
could not get
remember
them.
I remember being really young and for your anniversary you found somehow a
Yeah,
record player and mum was like, okay, we have to keep this in good condition because
yeah,
if it breaks
yeah.
we
They
can't
were
get another
very
one.
hard to get, and then
Yeah.
it
Whereas
surprised
now
me.
it's just my age,
Yeah,
people my age just collect them. And I
yeah.
think it's really fascinating generation wise because Grandad loves MP3s.
It is. Yeah.
MP3s. And I think he just downloads so many.
Well, he
Whereas,
came from it from the opposite direction. So he,
yeah,
when he was young, you only had physical
yeah,
media. I'm my generation because I was born in August 1980, so I'm right at the end of Gen X,
yeah,
sort of the last
mm,
phase before the millennials.
yeah, yeah,
You know, I can sort of see the difference between me and someone slightly younger. There
yeah,
is a definite difference. So
yeah,
I'm right on the edge of Gen X.
yeah,
I do remember having the physical stuff, but I do remember growing up and being in my 20s when all it went digital. But
yeah.
for Grandad, that's the way it went. It was all
It's like,
physical. He went into digital. So digital
yeah.
was like this amazing
So
new
it's like,
thing.
wow, I can have this small device and
Yeah.
have. He literally has thousands of songs on his phone, just
Well, it was amazing.
MP3s,
It was when it
and
first came
it's
out. That was
like,
absolutely
how on earth?
astonishing.
Yeah,
But obviously, your generation has come from the opposite
opposite.
direction.
Yeah,
You started off with you can watch anything you want. You can
yeah,
have 10,000. So it means nothing to you. But
yeah.
physical media,
It's like
yeah.
I can
Oh, I
show
can hold.
people.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
because
would
that was
love.
one of the sad things about vinyl is the vinyl covers.
Mm.
The artwork was
That's
amazing.
another thing because I mean, you have artwork on Spotify, but it's barely anything. Like it's
CDs were the
to
same.
to
Yeah,
yeah to. I mean, I have a CD collection, and I would love to have a vinyl collection, but I don't really have the space for a turntable. But one day I really
what when
want.
you've done me, you'll
Yeah,
have
when
a
I've done.
vinyl collection. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
I know
yeah.
your plan.
I so CDs. I collect a lot of CDs, and when I got my car, our old car only could do Bluetooth,
Yeah.
didn't have a CD player. So to have a CD player in the car was like a really big thing for me. That's something I
Yeah.
looked for in a car to have a CD player because then people come in my car and they see my CDs and that's a talking point.
Mm.
Same as like I don't know, like with vinyl, you buy a vinyl and some people like display them or you have like a shelf with them and you have people over and they can look through your vinyl
Mm.
and it has the artwork but it also has the posters or it has the lyrics on the inside
Yeah.
and it's like an experience, right?
Yeah.
Rather than just pressing a button and then
Yeah, and that was that is the surprising thing. I had a Walkman, I had a collection of cassettes.
yeah,
Of course, that all went away, and it was just assumed that now we have MP3s.
yeah,
This is the way things are. But it's surprised a lot of people over the last decade or so to find people your age suddenly want all the physical
yeah.
media. Even the local shop. Um, I was chatting to the guy in there, and I was surprised. He said he's selling 8 track, which is even this is
Okay,
before me.
right,
I don't recall 8 track. I
okay,
recall cassettes when
yeah,
they came into cars, but it is surprising. It's surprising. And going back to the science fiction again, it was around about the 90s that it changed the way science fiction was being done
yeah,
changed, and it started to go from the syndication, and it was all it wasn't just science fiction. Every program
Mm.
was done on that format. I remember when I was little, you had programs like He-Man. The A-Team were really big.
Okay.
I don't think we've seen
I've
the
heard of
A-Team.
it.
Yeah, Mr. T was a big.
Okay.
Everybody loved it. You had Thundercats and
Okay.
all these programs, but they were all
They all
syndicated.
reset.
They all
Yeah.
reset. There was no
You could
storyline.
just any
You
order
know,
you could watch them. And
they
it
could be broadcast in any order for you. You didn't even they didn't even do it on series. It was just
okay. That's interesting.
yeah, they brought the rights to series 1, 2, and 3. They
Right.
just
That's
completely
interesting.
broadcast them. So sometimes I remember growing up, I used to watch the original Teenage Mutant Hero. Well, we called it Hero Turtles in
Oh,
Britain.
okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was called Hero Turtles.
Okay.
But even that, when I look at the broadcast order, I'm actually surprised. Some of what which I remember being broadcast, was actually 2 or 3 series in. It was
Okay.
just constantly repeating, and
Yeah.
that was, you had no order. But that started to change in the 90s,
Yeah.
because the Star Trek the Next Generation, when that first came out, that was done in that way. So the first few series, it was done along the Sydney. So although they did change a little bit. They had Tasha Yar, um, which still haunts me to this day.
Okay.
Having Tasha Yar killed off,
Oh, okay.
because they never did that.
Oh, they
You
didn't
could.
kill off.
No, they didn't kill off main
Uh,
characters. So that was a complete shock when that
yeah.
Tasha Yar, she's dead. She's not coming back. That was a complete
Oh,
surprise. And I
yeah.
never got over that.
Yes. I think that's like Doctor Who. Now they just kill people off.
Yeah,
But
it was very rare. They
classic Doctor Who,
classic did
you
once
could
or
not. I
twice.
remember
They killed Adric
they
off.
did, they did. That was
Uh,
yeah, that was kind of sad. But that was kind of Fifth Doctor. So
yeah,
right at the beginning, like
they
I don't
changed the
know. It's
characters out, but they
interesting.
didn't. It's
It
very
would.
rare
I
for
feel
them to
like it
do.
would be like, oh, they just went home, or they
Yeah,
got married, or
They
they,
didn't do anything to shock. Series 2 of the Next Generation, they did have a change up,
Okay.
and in and as it went on, they started to introduce storylines. But for
Okay.
me, what I remember, the first TV science fiction series that did it was planned to be a 5 year storyline was Babylon 5,
Okay.
and that's how it was sold. And I think they had a lot of trouble actually getting it off the ground because
Hmm.
TV networks wanted syndicated,
Yeah.
whereas he wanted this is the 5 year plan.
I think that's like a lot of things with companies pitching an idea that's different from the market.
Yeah,
They kind of feel like they're taking a risk with it.
yeah, they did. And it's a cult classic. I can't remember. I remember that was broadcast on Channel 4. I remember
Mm.
that coming out. But that was a huge thing because broadcast week by week.
Yeah.
So although the Next Generation, they did have 2-part stories.
Okay.
They did, I believe, they started doing that around about series 3. So the end of series 3 was the best of both worlds, where
Okay. So
Captain
you have
Picard becomes Locutus.
right.
Now we were lucky in this country that we only had a week to wait. I think in America
Okay.
they had to wait for the next season over summer.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
which was a bit of a.
yeah.
But you still had to wait a week. But for Babylon 5, it went through. Series 1, there was a storyline, but as it went on, series 2, you started to see more of the story. You really got into it. Series 3 and 4, you had to watch it in order
Yeah.
to understand it.
Yeah.
So that was a completely different experience for us compared to what had come before. But then
Yeah.
it started to change. So you ended up with Deep Space Nine, then started to move away. As I think the first couple of series they tried to keep it almost as they wanted. Then the studio kind of lost interest in Deep Space Nine,
Okay.
and they were able to do long form storylines.
Right.
So this was starting to come in. Another TV series that started to do that was X Files. I
I
don't recall
haven't.
ever showing you X
No, I
Files.
know what it is. Like I've seen
Yeah,
you watch it, but I haven't really
that
myself.
was yeah. The X Files was a huge hit in the mid '90s. I can't remember what year it came out, but
Mm.
that was a huge hit. And that started off with the monster of the week type things. And there's some
Okay.
really good episodes. In actual fact, it spoiled a Doctor Who episode for me.
Oh, okay.
There was the story with the in the library. Remember
Yeah.
the one with Donna and
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
ones in the
Yeah,
library where
yeah.
if you step in the shadows you get
Yeah.
eaten. The X Files had already done that story.
Oh.
They did, and it's one of my favourites. A really good episode
Oh.
where they go up to this cabin in the middle of the forest to find out what happened to all these loggers.
Yeah.
And it turns out they'd accidentally released these
Oh.
tiny insects that only appear in the dark and eat people.
Right.
You know, and I remember watching that when I was a young teenager, being terrified
Yeah.
by it. So when it got to the
Oh.
Doctor Who episode, it was like, oh
Yeah.
well,
I've already
I've
seen
already
it.
seen this.
I
Yeah,
think that's a lot of things. I think that's why I never get on with like there's a lot of movies I don't get on with because I can just predict like Avatar. I can't remember when I watched it, but at one point obviously that was really big just purely for the visuals.
it was the visuals
But
that really did.
I watched it
Yeah,
when that wasn't such a big that was more common
yeah,
having visuals like that. So I watched it and it was like, why do people like this? Because I just well, as I was watching it, I completely just predicted the whole
yeah.
storyline. Whereas I and then I looked into it and it was like, oh, actually, it was just the visuals. People
It
were
was
like,
well with yeah. I remember when that came out because we did go through a period of, and it's funny to look back now how much it's completely disappeared of 3D
mm,
films.
yeah,
Because when I don't know if Avatar was the first one to do that, but it was the first big hit,
yeah,
and it was filmed in 3D.
okay,
And so it was because they used a special camera technique where as they were filming it, they were filming it for 3D.
okay,
So when people went to the cinema to see it, it was this amazing experience. You had your
mm,
3D glasses.
mm,
It was absolutely astonishing, you know, and it really was an absolute visual
mm,
masterpiece.
yeah,
But the trouble was, other studios then realised that they can make a huge amount of money,
mm,
and the problem they did was rather than planning it and filming the film in 3D,
yeah,
they added 3D as an afterthought,
okay,
and
yeah,
they kind of almost killed it by all these films
yeah.
were coming out in 3D that weren't
Meant
designed.
to, yeah, and it
They were
wasn't
never
good.
designed to be 3D, so it was
Okay,
never as good. And I'm
right.
surprised actually looking back how quickly that
Yeah,
went
because
away.
at first it was like, oh, this big new thing. This is going to
Yeah,
be the future of
yeah, yeah.
cinema, and it's just not.
No, it's completely. I don't
Does
recall there
and
being,
do
and
you things
considering
even come out on 3D
I
anymore?
don't
I
think
don't
it
know.
does. Yeah, I don't know if it does. It's a very rare thing. But
Yeah,
considering how prevalent it was,
yeah,
there was just everything was in 3D. But that was the problem.
yeah.
You know, it was they had the shiny new thing, and rather than using it properly,
They just
they just slapped 3D on
yeah.
everything,
Okay.
thinking they can make some money off it, and it
Yeah.
kind of killed which is it's a real shame because it's a really good effect. And
Mm.
Avatar was good,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
unfortunately, the story it's all right. It's all
Yeah.
right. I've never been a massive fan of Avatar,
No,
but
it was just for me. I just watched it and just I knew what was going to happen, which kind of
yeah,
ruined it.
yeah,
But that just reminded me of it because there are these storylines that at one point was just like you would have never expected it because it was new.
yeah.
Whereas now, so many things use the exact same storyline in
Yeah,
different
yeah,
shows.
that's sort of why I don't put much faith. I'm always very cautious about watching a new show because
Yeah,
either they use the same old formulas
yeah,
or the other thing they do, which I'll talk about a bit well, is they do one series and then stop it,
yeah,
which
yeah,
is so frustrating.
yeah,
But yeah, so I mean that was the thing in the 90s. I mean, X Files started to. They had a storyline
mm,
that came through. It wasn't designed for them, but I think that the unique thing with Babylon 5 was it was, they actually wrote the story.
yeah.
It starts, year one, year two, year three, year four, year five.
It's
Here's
a
the
properly
storyline. It was
planned.
a properly planned.
Yeah.
And they even had a plan to go on to do another 5 year arc
Okay. Wow.
afterwards.
Yeah.
But it never kind of worked out in
No.
the end. They sort of chopped and changed things. But we
Yeah.
got the 5 year storyline, and
Yeah.
as I think you and Holly will find, it's a really great storyline. They had some really interesting characters.
Yeah.
But when Deep Space Nine started to do their Dominion War story, they followed through. That was from then on. It started to become a standard
Right.
that
Okay.
as science fiction or even whatever TV series it is, there would be a
A
story arc
storyline.
to the point now where I don't think they do syndicated shows anymore. Everything has
No.
a
I
story
think
arc.
the only thing like that would be like children's
Yeah,
programs, and even then, children's programs tend to. Some of them have it's kind of half half. Some of them have storylines. Some of them are just.
yeah. Well, it's
But
interesting. It's
yeah.
interesting the way it's gone because I mean another thing is they have a lot shorter series. Than they used to. Like I said, with the old shows, a standard series in America was 22 episodes, but
Okay.
in Britain it was the other way round. A series would have 6 episodes.
Okay.
So a lot of the old BBC series, Doctor Who was slightly different because you'd have storylines of
Yeah.
about four, it varied in
Yeah.
episodes, but you had things, BBC comedies, Yes Minister, Blackadder,
Mm.
Young Ones, and all these things. If they were given a series, it was 6 episodes.
Okay.
Now, that's got pluses and minuses because you tend to take all the creativity and all the jokes and put them into 6 episodes.
Okay.
But if you get a dud episode,
Mm.
that's 1/6 of your entire
Yeah,
series is
that's quite
rubbish.
a big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you had this side of the Atlantic, you'd have a very short series of six
Mm.
episodes, and in America you'd have a 22 episode, which again has its problems. Which,
Yeah.
although you can get a lot of good episodes, you used to get halfway through a series, you get a lull.
I find for me that's more daunting as well. Like 6 series isn't, 6 episodes isn't too much time to
No,
invest, whereas 22 is quite a big
it's a
chunk
lot, and
to invest into
it
something.
used to. I remember Smallville was a series that came out in the early 2000s, and that was a really good idea. That started off that had some what we call monster of the week episodes
Okay.
where something would happen and then there's this creature you got to defeat it
Yeah.
and there was a slight storyline, but that did suffer from the fact that it was 22 episodes and it was a slog to get through.
Right.
And
Yeah.
usually in the middle, what they would do was they'd resolve the story. And I only got as far as series 8 with Smallville. I did get fed up with it in the
Yeah.
end because I think it went on too long. Yeah, that was the problem getting through some of Smallville. But I found with Smallville, it was a bit of a problem because what they would do is the second half of the series, they build up to an almost unstoppable climax, and in the end episode you had no idea how they're going to solve it, and then
Yeah.
the next series it will be done and dusted by the end of the first episode,
Okay.
and it's like, oh, you built us up for
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
and then it would have a slow, and
Okay.
yeah, and so
Whereas you could have spent more time further
yeah,
into the series, second
and so
series.
you ended up with this slog around the middle. So I think what they did with what they're doing now, having 13 episodes as kind of a stand round about that
Yeah.
now. Sometimes I've noticed some of them about 10 episodes. It
Mm.
gives you time to build up a story, build up excitement to the cliffhanger, but it doesn't seem such a slog.
Mm.
Especially at the time we were watching it, we were getting it on Love Film, so we'd watch a DVD, send it back,
Okay.
get it back.
Yeah.
They just seemed such a slog.
Mm.
But yeah, that was the way it was. But yeah, I think it's definitely better now. It's the
Yeah.
way it is. It's not quite such a slog as it used to be to get through to the end of the
Mm.
series. I do recall in the 90s they were, it was almost a golden age of science fiction because they were bringing out loads and loads of different science fiction programs. Some were interesting, some had interesting. There was one called Space Above and Beyond, and that was a war with an alien race, and they're following a fighter group that's on a starship. But again, this is why I'm always cautious with starting a new series. They did one series, you got into it,
Yeah.
and then they cancelled it.
Yeah. I know. I know. Obviously, I'm really into the Dark Crystal,
Yeah.
and they started that Netflix series,
Yeah,
and that was so annoying because they built it up. It
yeah,
wasn't meant to just be
yeah.
one
And
series.
then they cancelled it.
And because I really loved it,
Yeah,
and it just it's just left on a cliffhanger. And I think Netflix, that was a Netflix show, they really made a mistake because they were cutting shows to for
yeah,
cost reasons, but that I think they should have kept that
yeah.
because
It's so frustrating. And I can't remember the name of the program. There was another program they did one series of
yeah.
where there was a hurricane and there was an alien parasite.
Right.
That got dredged up from the water,
Okay.
and they were slowly taking over everybody in the town, sort of
Right.
an invasion of the body snatchers type thing.
Okay. Yeah.
And they finished on a cliffhanger, and that was
Yeah.
it.
And they
There's
just
no more.
didn't.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
there's no
so
more.
frustrating.
Yeah, yeah.
Um.
And either that, or what's frustrating is they come up with a really good idea, and then they kind of go off the rails with it a little
Okay.
bit.
Yeah.
There was Fallen Skies was another one. That was a really interesting idea where aliens have come and conquered the planet, and
Yeah.
it's it's the survivors trying to battle again. It's a fantastic idea,
Yeah.
and they did a couple of series on that. It was really, really good, and it kind of went off the rails. And you're
Okay.
like, well, why have you done this? This is
Yeah.
absolutely
Yeah.
mad.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it kind of ruins it. So I'm always a bit
Yeah. It's
cautious
annoying.
starting something now,
Yeah.
not knowing whether it's you get into it, it's going to be cancelled,
Yeah.
or whether it's going to survive, or whether it's going to go slightly
Yeah.
mad.
I think that's just everything's just oversaturated.
Yeah.
Whereas before, it was limited. If you're only having like four TV channels, there's only so much you can make.
Yeah, and the thing is as well with having only 4 channels, it's kind of forced them to be creative
Yeah.
because you had a choice.
Yeah.
And you used to get ratings. If you go back to the 80s, bearing in mind, I think population was about 60 million ish, round about
Okay.
that. Some programs would get 20, 30 million
Oh wow.
viewers. It was the ratings
That's
were
crazy.
amazing.
Yeah.
You go back to the 70s, the 80s. You'd have programs like the Two Ronnies, Morecambe and Wise were huge,
Okay.
and they would get audiences of 20 million.
Yeah.
Would be what they expected,
Wow.
because then the advertising revenue from that fund all
Yeah.
these programs, and they knew that they had to put out because they're in direct competition with ITV because it
Yeah.
was BBC One and ITV were the two big competitors.
Okay.
Channel 4 was a bit more specialist, and
Okay.
BBC 2 was almost the BBC's experimental channel. So,
Okay. Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
BBC One and ITV,
Okay.
and it was the Saturday night
Yeah.
was the big one,
Wow.
and they
Okay.
would really have
And
to.
you only have two options, and if you
You got
miss
two options,
one, you
and this
can't go
is
back.
yeah, and
Yeah.
this was the thing. You could what
Wow.
people would do is they'd watch one and record the other, but it was they were both chasing these really high ratings, so they
Mm.
would put their money into and you look back at it, it's the quality of the TV programs still stand up today. People still
I
love
think that's the
what they were
biggest
producing.
difference. I think now we have all these like CGI and stuff, you have amazing visuals, but I think it's lacking in the story, the writing. Whereas before it was like they'd have to build sets and stuff. And sometimes you watch like I don't know, Doctor Who episodes where the walls are literally
I
cardboard.
know that was
So they'd
hilarious.
like knock on the door and you have to be careful that the set's not gonna fall
Yeah,
over. But because of that, because
Tomb of the
visually,
Cybermen. I
yeah,
love the
oh,
wonderful
I
story.
love it. Okay,
Wonderful storyline, but the
it's
sets were very wobbly.
like the doors of Tomb of the Cybermen are ridiculous because you can see trying to open it, you're
Yeah,
trying to make it look like they're these really heavy doors, but they're just cardboard. Moonbase and Team of the Cybermen specifically, I watched them quite a lot, and Mondasian Cybermen, and yeah, the sets because you can see
they're not
they're
good.
not
Yeah,
good.
but you had to have a good
You had to
storyline to
to
make
make
up
up
for it.
for
Yeah,
yeah
and it was a big hit show. You
yeah.
like I said, you
Well,
would get by
Grandad's
the 80s you would get audiences 10, 20,
yeah.
30 million for a really popular
Yeah,
show.
Grandad said for Tomb of the Cybermen, I was once watching it on DVD, and I sent Grandad a picture because that came out when he was a
Yeah,
child, and he said that when he was little, they were terrified of it because they'd never seen anything
yeah,
like it before. It was a
yeah,
very new kind of thing. They just didn't have stuff
yeah.
like that. But
But
whereas now it's just
yeah,
it's not.
you're
You wouldn't get scared.
desensitized. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
desensitized to it.
definitely.
But that was the thing. But you had the problem, and it was in the late 90s. So you had in the 90s, you in this country, you had Sky came out.
Okay.
People, and so you had a huge amount of suddenly you had a lot of new television channels.
Mm.
And so rather than having, if you had a TV audience of 40 million, possibly for that one night, being split between possibly four
Okay.
channels.
Yeah.
Suddenly you had the same amount of an audience split between 10 channels, 20
Okay.
channels, and that's you got in the early 2000s. You started to get digital broadcasting,
Okay.
where you've got this. You were able to buy a set top box, so instead of just having 4 channels, you could have 30, 100
Oh,
channels.
is that like we used to get BT
Yeah,
like box
yeah, you
things?
get the box set, so you just because you can do it with your TV now. You look
Yeah.
through, you've got BBC One, BBC Two, BBC, BBC
Yeah.
Four,
Yeah.
ITV One, Two, Three,
Yeah.
Four,
Yeah.
and
You have
you'd
so many.
yeah you'd have all these channels, and that was the problem they had was suddenly the advertising revenue rather than advertising for 20 million people, suddenly
Yes.
you're getting 1, 2 million.
Right.
And the
Because
advertisers aren't willing to pay as much money,
right,
which means you need to make
you're
things
making
cheaper.
less
And so what they
money. Yeah.
discovered was reality TV.
Okay.
So you ended up with Big Brother was one of the first ones,
Okay.
and you suddenly got all these reality, and it just
Right.
saturated.
Yeah.
And they discovered that rather than investing a lot of money into really good TV
Mm.
programs, putting a lot of investment into it, they could spend a quarter of the money
Yeah.
filming random people doing crazy
Random. Yeah,
stuff,
that's not my
and
kind of
suddenly,
TV.
yeah, and suddenly they so that I think that did affect it.
Yeah.
I think that did affect it a lot. Yeah, and I think the quality definitely went down, but they were less willing to take a chance. So
Yeah.
if you had a TV program, so previously, let's take Blackadder for instance.
Mm.
The first series didn't really hit. People weren't really sure about it. But BBC took a chance and they said, all right, the first series wasn't very good.
Right.
If you want to do a second series, you're going to have to chop your budget right down. And so
Okay.
they experimented
Okay.
and they hit on something that really, really worked.
Okay.
And then the BBC gave them extra money. And you were able to do that. You were able to experiment a bit. And if
Yeah.
it didn't quite hit the first time, they'd be more willing to give another go. So,
Right.
all right, it didn't quite hit,
Mm.
but you got enough ratings to justify a second go.
Yeah.
They did that with the Star Trek movie, the first one.
Okay.
It wasn't a brilliant hit. It's not the best film.
Yeah.
I think it's a good science fiction film, but it's not a good Star Trek
Okay.
movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
You're
it
trying to
made,
hold up the
but it,
name.
yeah, but it made a lot of money. They made enough back from their budget to justify a second movie,
Okay.
but with a smaller budget.
Yeah.
So they were able to say, look, we've made enough money. We'll give a second one a go, but you
Mm.
ain't got the budget you've got for the first one. You're going to
Yeah.
have to make cuts. And they
Yeah.
did the experiment. And because that worked, they then did, oh, right, this is really good. We'll do number 3, we'll do number 4. Number
Yeah.
4 was a success. So they said, actually, there's enough interest to justify another TV series. And it kind of went on from there, so you've got everything you've got now. But, in 2000s, you had the problem that you just were not getting the big TV audiences.
Yeah.
So they weren't as willing to give it a go, give a second series a go. So if the first season wasn't a massive hit, you'd
Yeah.
have it cancelled.
Yeah. I think people almost when they're writing a first series, and they can't take as many risks. Maybe they try and do more with it and it kind of doesn't go. They try and do more shock value or something, or more
Yeah,
different, try and do different things to get an audience, right?
yeah. It's kind of that's the trouble. It's kind of the curse. I think they had the same problem in the music industry, whereas
It's so
years ago,
saturated.
yeah, and decades ago, the companies would be willing to give a band, if the first album didn't work. I think Queen didn't really take off until the fourth album.
Okay,
But if
wow.
they come out now, if
They
your
wouldn't,
first album doesn't make a big splash and a big hit,
then you can't do
that's
anything
it. And
else. Yeah.
this is the problem that we've
Yeah.
got, where if it doesn't make a massive hit the
Yeah.
first time, or
But
doesn't
then
hit,
Queen, you can go back, now
yeah,
after they became big, you can then go
yeah.
back to their previous stuff.
But I mean,
Whereas,
but you did have bands that did 2 or 3 albums and never took off,
right,
and they may take a loss. But the ones that did take off, they'd make a huge amount. But
yeah,
it's the same problem with a lot of the TV. If you don't hit the first time, they're not as willing, and so that I think that's why you ended up with a lot of TV series, which if they didn't hit the first time, you'd have you go back, you watch this. I mean, there was another one, Firefly. It's a really big cult TV program. People absolutely love it, but they only got one series.
Okay.
It didn't hit the ratings that they wanted, and so
They
they
couldn't
cancelled it.
do,
They did
yeah.
eventually do a movie to tie the story up,
Okay.
but it's unfortunately it's one of them ones that it's kind of a missed opportunity. We don't
Yeah.
know what we could have had out of that because it was an
Yeah.
interesting setting,
Yeah.
and we don't know what we could have, because we can't go back and
No,
redo it
no.
because that's 20 years ago
Yeah.
now. It's too late to go back and fix that.
Yeah.
But some TV programs did make the hit. I think Battlestar Galactica.
Okay.
That was, yeah. I always found that one an interesting one because during the 90s, I mean, with going back to Star Trek, you did have, although Deep Space Nine ended up doing the serialized version, Voyager tried to go back to the episodic version a little
Okay.
bit.
Yeah, yeah.
I've always, yeah, Voyager's for me has always been a bit of a, it could have been great,
Right.
but I think it was the studio insisted on them, keeping it more episodic
Yeah, yeah.
than it should have been.
Okay.
I think it got to the point where one of the writers was so frustrated he actually
Yeah.
went off and
Yeah.
did Battlestar Galactica.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's part of a problem. The problem, writers, have these ideas, but they have to go ultimately with what the
What the
company say.
studio wants,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. Which the studios aren't the ones writing. So do they know better than the writers? But then if you let a writer loose, then
Yeah, and
you know.
sometimes it can work, sometimes it doesn't. I mean, that was the problem with Voyager. At the
Mm,
end of each episode, the ship had to be pristine
right.
again. So, and I think had they done it similar to Battlestar Galactica, where the ship was slowly breaking down over time,
Yeah.
it could have been a lot more interesting.
Yeah.
But they were caught, I think, in the crossover between episodic syndicated
Okay.
TV and the serialized TV that we get nowadays.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I've always, although I do like Voyager,
Mm,
there are some really good episodes.
mm.
I've always felt it's a bit of a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
It could have been great,
Yeah.
but they weren't quite allowed to be great. Why it always grates that Ensign Kim was never promoted.
Okay.
7 years and was
Yeah.
never promoted, and
Yeah.
the ship could. There's so much they could have done.
Because that makes sense, the ship breaking down, and you can do so
Yeah,
much with that.
yeah,
But it's
they
just
did.
keeping it.
Well, they did a two-part series, The Year of Hell,
Okay.
which was actually really, and they did. To be fair, they did do some really interesting stories.
Yeah.
But The Year of Hell there was a time traveling one where the ship was just being constantly attacked,
Right.
and as you went along, the ship was falling to pieces. They
Yeah.
were trying to repair it on the fly,
Yeah.
but then, from what I understand, the studio didn't want it to stay like that. So at
Okay.
the end of it, they had to have it resolved, and at the end, the
Yeah.
ship was all nice and shiny again.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's to me, the Voyager is more of what it could have been great. It was
Yeah.
good. It could
Yeah.
have been great, but
Yeah.
they just weren't
That's
allowed
really
to.
frustrating.
Very frustrating.
Yeah.
But the writer then went on to do Battlestar Galactica, and that was really
Okay.
interesting. Yeah, they had, as that went on. I mean, there's a few things that bugged me about Battlestar Galactica,
Okay.
but overall, it was an interesting story, and it did have the ship starting to break down.
Yeah.
I think they were too heavily relied on Starbuck being great at everything, but
Okay.
they did have some really interesting storylines with that one. So it was a pretty good one.
Yeah.
But like I said, over the last decade or so, I've not really gotten into the side because I've just been too cautious. I don't
Yeah.
want to get into a series and suddenly
Yeah.
find they've cancelled it.
Yeah.
But
Well,
there's a
yeah.
few series I've been watching. Some of the Mandalorian I really enjoyed.
Okay.
I did like that. Some of the other Star Wars, Andor was an interesting one.
Okay.
I quite liked that one. But the Star Wars, I think it does suffer from the stories just aren't that
Mm,
interesting.
right. Yeah.
I think a lot of it is starting to. I haven't watched Doctor Who for quite a while because
Yeah, it's
it's just
just
not that interesting anymore,
yeah,
unfortunately. It's unfortunate because some of the actors are really
yeah, they're really
Nakuti.
talented.
I always thought he was really good as the Doctor. They just
Yeah,
gave him some awful
yeah,
storylines.
yeah.
Babies on a starship. What I watched
You think
that.
Mum was like, what?
I watched that and I just thought, what are you doing? And it's
Yeah,
unfortunate
because it could
because
have been. He could have been really good.
as the Doctor, I think he's quite good. You
Yeah,
know, there's a lot of controversy surrounding him, and there's a lot of culture wars over him. But you know,
yeah,
as an actor, I actually thought he could have been a really,
yeah,
really good Doctor, but
yeah,
he's just been hampered by the
yeah. It's a
storylines. They
story.
just seem to be
Mm,
running out of ideas of what to do, and it's
yeah.
really unfortunate. I did like the Christmas episode that he
I
did with
haven't
the
seen it.
hotel. Yeah, the one in
Mm,
the hotel. I can't remember what it's called.
mm,
But I quite enjoyed that. I thought it was a
yeah,
really nice idea. And like I said, I
yeah.
thought as a doctor, he could have been really good.
I
But
think it's just,
it's,
the people who watch it, who do watch it, are kind of hoping and like
yeah,
they're like we want it to be good, but
yeah,
it's just I think people kind of they don't want to put in the effort of watching it because of
that's the
they've
trouble.
kind of fallen
Yeah,
off.
that's the
And
trouble. And it just seemed, it just, there does seem to be a lot of TV programs just seem to be
yeah,
running out of steam.
yeah,
But the last one I watched, which I actually really enjoyed, was Dune Prophecy.
okay,
I think that was, I can't remember how many episodes, that was less than 10.
yeah,
And that was a really interesting one. So
okay,
I've got some hope. I think there's another
yeah,
series coming from that. So I have got some hope that there are some science fiction series coming, which will prove to be, you know, really interesting and
yeah,
prove to be good. I do the Stargate episodes again.
okay,
That was another one. I
yeah,
really enjoyed that. Some really good episodes in the Stargate SG1. But they again, it was, you know, I really enjoyed SG1. That went on slightly too because they'd done everything and wrapped everything up in Series 8, and then were told they had two more series.
okay. That's part of the problem in a lot of
Yeah,
these things. They
uh,
kind of
and then they did Atlantis,
right,
which was 5 series long, and they took some risks. They kept killing off characters, and I'm not 100%. I like the first couple of series, but
yeah,
they did try different things, and then they did Universe, and again 2 series, and then they cancelled it.
okay, yeah.
So you know, that kind of
I
um,
think there's a lot of things where it's like the writers and the studios have different ideas,
yeah.
and that kind of messes
It
it up
does.
a bit.
It does a bit. But it's surprised. I mean, like I said, over my lifetime, I was born in 1980, and to see the change looking back from where it was syndicated episodes, you know, they come up with a storyline, and if there's any change, it happens over a case of from one series to the next.
Yeah.
Looking back at Buck Rogers, the first series was set on Earth, the second series was set on a starship
Okay.
with the Hawkman. But that was how it was done. You know, you can watch broadcast TV.
Mm.
During the 90s, there was some really good science fiction out there, but it changed from, and you can see when you look through, it changed from, you know, episodic TV to serialized TV to now everything is serialized.
Okay. Yeah.
But I definitely think it's improved in that, you know, you don't have to slog through
Mm.
nearly 30 episodes of a TV series to
I
get the storyline.
I think a lot of these things it's just a middle ground between having good writing and a good set,
Yeah,
good
yeah.
visuals. I think you need to be somewhere in
You
the
do.
middle,
Yeah, you do. You definitely do need to be that. So, you know, get that, if you can get that
the
balance
balance. Yeah.
right, it really does make a difference. I mean, there was one film I remember, Superman Returns. I went to the cinema to see it,
Okay.
and the visual effects were in the cinema were absolutely amazing.
Okay.
I just couldn't find a storyline anywhere. And Clark
Yeah.
Kent, you might as well have had just done a cardboard cutout, you know, because I grew up with Christopher Reeves, and he was amazing. His Clark Kent to Superman.
Okay.
He could take his glasses off, and you
It's
could believe,
believable, yeah.
absolutely believable. I'm not sure if any
Wow.
actors done that, where
Yeah,
he
that's a
could stand there
talent.
with his glasses on as Clark Kent,
Right.
and as he takes his glasses off, you can
Switch.
see him changing into
It's a very
Superman.
fascinating thing.
Very good at it.
Actors just like mentally, what they do is really fascinating. How they can go from themselves to different characters,
yeah,
and some of them get so into the characters, they start eating, they start trying to adopt the same diets and the same routines to just get in the mindset of it.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
really, really fascinating. You said you were telling me something about the guy who played Lando.
Oh, yeah, Peter Jurassic.
Yeah, you said he could switch.
Oh, I read a story. Jerry Dahl, who played Garibaldi,
Yeah.
was telling me a story. Well, not telling me personally. Yeah, he was on the phone.
On the phone with
Yeah, unfortunately, with
you.
Babylon 5, a lot of the actors have passed
Yeah,
away.
yeah,
Unfortunately, Jerry Dahl was passed away.
yeah.
But he's told a story where he'd be sitting. If they were doing a scene in the bar, he'd be standing there. Peter would be telling a story. You'd get action, and he'd be straight into Londo, and it would throw the other actors because he's just right up to the word action. He's just chatting away, and then
Yeah,
suddenly he's the character.
right.
And as soon as the director said cut, he's back to his story.
It's fascinating.
Phenomenal actor.
Yeah,
And that's the thing. You get some of these really good character actors. They can really bring a series to life. So you
yeah.
need that good.
Psychologically, it's
Yeah,
so fascinating, actors.
yeah.
That's really how
Yeah.
they just switch, kind of personalities.
I think you need the good balance of a good story and a good
Yeah,
writing, and it
yeah,
needs direction. They need to know
yeah,
what,
yeah,
what they're doing,
yeah,
mixed with actors and good sets and even makeup.
yeah, yeah.
Andreas, who played Jakar,
Right.
you can see through his makeup. You can
Hmm.
see, he's not just static. It's you can tell his expressions and his
Yeah,
emotions through the makeup.
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
yeah, but over my lifetime, it has changed a huge amount.
yeah.
There's been some really good hits. You can tell a franchise sometimes is getting to the end. Star Trek, it kind of we got through. When I was growing up, you just had Star Trek everywhere. You
Hmm.
got to the 2000s and it finished up with Enterprise, which was I enjoyed it, I liked it, but you could tell it was starting to run out of steam, the whole franchise, and
Yeah.
unfortunately they had some really good storylines and it got cancelled, but I think they still had plans
Hmm.
for it. But by that point, they'd kind of run out of steam and ideas of Star Trek. But they've come back. One of my favourites, my favourite modern one, is Lower Decks, the
Okay.
cartoon one, because it absolutely makes fun of the whole franchise. But it is
Oh,
really
okay.
good fun. It's really
Okay.
good fun. Unfortunately, they finished that now,
Yeah.
which I'm a bit sad about.
Ah.
But I am enjoying Strange New Worlds. It's
Okay.
a different take on Star Trek, but I'm quite enjoying that. I wasn't as keen on Discovery. I found the character Michael Burnham was used a bit too much as a Mary Sue for me.
Okay.
Whatever she did, even if she broke the Prime Directive, all she had to do was give a speech, and
Okay.
suddenly everything was right, and
Okay.
it did. I managed to get to the end, but it did sort of grate a little bit with me. But aside from that, they had some really good ideas and they had some really good characters in there. So there's still possibilities.
Hmm.
I did watch Picard, not as keen on Picard, but it did
Okay.
wrap up the next generation story. There was a bit of nostalgia
Loose ends.
for old
Oh,
folk
okay.
like me.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, the one I'm watching at the moment, the one I like at the moment is Strange New Worlds. I do quite enjoy that.
yeah,
Some people aren't as keen on it, but there's enough light-heartedness
yeah.
to make it interesting. So yeah, so there's still stuff coming out. We'll have to see whether it proves to be any good and whether they return to some kind of, because I think a lot of science fiction the last couple of decades have been mega serialized. You have to watch each, So whether they return to some kind of mixture,
Hmm.
which I think would be quite good, so
Yeah.
you don't have to watch it.
Mixture, yeah, is
Yeah, but
might be
we'll
good.
see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's my life in
Your life
science
in
fiction.
right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's 45 years worth of me
45
watching
years.
science fiction. So we'll
Yeah.
see what the next few decades bring.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for listening. Next week, Holly will be back, and we'll be back to Babylon 5. What's the next?
Midnight on the Firing Line. I'm quite
Okay.
excited for you to start watching watching it, it gets into the series.
Okay.
And yeah, it's slightly episodic. The first series is slightly episodic with grains of what's coming in the future scattered
Okay.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Some of the things you learn in series one,
Yeah.
you find out more as you go along.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely some really good episodes.
You know, listening to it back, the first episode, Holly's weirdly good at podcasting. She's like really weirdly good, and I think we've found a talent there.
Yes,
I'm
yeah,
quite happy with that.
yeah. Well, it was quite a good first episode. I look forward to when the next one comes out. So
Next one, after the first one is Button Moon, and then this one, and then back
yeah.
to Babylon 5.
Well, hopefully my presence hasn't driven the audience away. It's just a
Yeah.
stepping stone. I'm the second, the distant second choice for
For the
stand-in for Holly. But
if
yeah,
Holly's ran away again.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah, she's on a cruise though.
yeah,
She's her brother is 13 and really into the Titanic.
yeah.
So I think the last cruise they went on, he kept on freaking her out because he kept on saying, "Holly, I'm gonna recreate that Titanic." She was freaked out, but I think she was a bit happier this time.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll see what they're like when they
When they
get
come
back.
back.
Whether we can get Calvin to come do something.
Oh, we need
We've
to.
got Ollie trying to learn C programming.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're trying to make use of
Calvin.
Ollie.
We need to crack into that talent because Titanic, he is like a fountain of knowledge.
Yeah,
He knows everything there is to know. You can't have a conversation with him.
yeah, they're great. They are. Yeah.
Yeah,
And my last few years of trying to get Holly to watch B5,
it's finally coming.
it's finally coming true. Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you for listening. Check out our YouTube channel if you're listening on Spotify. There's other content in our website. There's blogs on there and there's projects on there if you want to support us. And our Patreon will leave linked in the description.